I didn't see how many people raised hands, but I hope it wasn't too many because I'm a one-trick pony. I'm just gonna talk about what I read about. So Peter mentioned I don't come to the States too often. That is true, but actually I did come to the States a month ago, and that was part of the context of Peter inviting me to come here. I'm like, oh, I'm already going to do once. I could do 2 trips. I could kind of do a similar talk along those lines. And the problem was I went to this talk and I realized that I wasn't quite sure I agreed with myself. And this talk was at the University of Chicago. They're at a conference for antitrust. And as you can see, you don't need to read the whole thing, but it was about digital platforms and concentration. And you can see right in this, well, I guess you can see, they have Google, Amazon, and Facebook. And they asked me to do a little presentation at the beginning about how big these platforms are, how powerful they are, and to talk about aggregation theory, this sort of concept that I've worked out about how internet companies accrue power. And I realized within this sort of like first 2 minutes of the conference that there was kind of a mismatch happening as far as what platforms were in the context of aggregators. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the idea of aggregation theory, which really applies to, in this context, Google and Facebook, and then kind of bring you to where I kind of had some questions actually about what I'd written myself. And over the last few weeks, I've been working on Stratechery. I'm going to talk about today about where there might be some differences between what I call aggregators and what are platforms, kind of platform, the gold word in tech. So you know that there are some companies that are super duper dominant. Here's the top apps in the App Store, and they are dominated by Facebook and Google. Google has 7 of the top apps. Facebook has 3 of them. They have all of the top 5, 8 of the top 10. And you know, you look at them individually, and they are not only, here's search, for example. Google dominates search in the United States. It's actually much higher globally. It's close to 90% globally. And Facebook dominates the time that you spend on your devices. Keep in mind that graph, Instagram is the dark line, so actually Facebook's coverage is actually even greater than you can see from that. And you're in this context where digital dollars are increasing as a share of overall advertising. More and more is going to digital. It's the largest category in advertising. And within advertising, Facebook and Google are increasing their share, increasing their dominance. So you have basically 2 growth factors. One is that the overall market is growing, digital advertising, and second is they are increasing their share within that market. And make no mistake, this means they are very valuable companies. But I was looking at this chart specifically, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple. And again, I was here talking about digital platforms. And I was kind of getting hung up. Are Facebook and Google actually platforms in the way that, say, Microsoft was, particularly with Windows, or that Apple is with the App Store, or that Amazon is moving more and more in this direction, like Amazon Merchant Services on one side and AWS on the other, which is quite clearly a platform. And I wasn't sure if they're quite the same. So what is an aggregator? I've been using this term, and the way I think about it, something that's useful for me to do this, is go back to sort of the history of the internet and think about what made Google successful in the first place. So I know all of you know a lot of this. Maybe many of you were there. But going back to a brief history of Yahoo and Google, and back when Yahoo came along, the internet was very small. If you needed to find something on the internet, it was, you know, a needle in the proverbial haystack. Well, the haystack was just a little pile of straw. You could go in and you could pick out a needle, and that's basically what Yahoo did. This was the first version of the Yahoo page, and my favorite thing about this page is not just that it presumes to list the entire internet on a single page, but it actually has numbers next to each of them to tell you exactly how many pages there are in each of those categories. So today we're talking about, politics, 184. Wouldn't that be nice if there were only 184? Unfortunately, quite quickly, 2 years later, the internet is quite larger. And is it possible to find a needle in this haystack? It's possible. It's a little more difficult. And Yahoo, you can see, is getting a little more expansive now of subcategories. They got rid of the numbers. It wasn't really feasible anymore. The problem was, you go forward another 2 years and now try finding a needle. It's exceptionally difficult. Yahoo's getting heavier and heavier, and it's actually getting less and less useful, despite the fact it looks more useful. And you keep going, and pretty soon find a needle here. You're not going to find the needle anytime soon. And the problem for Yahoo is that the number of sites on the internet was increasing exponentially, and Yahoo, by being a sort of like human-driven curation service, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but was only increasing linearly, and it just couldn't keep up. And actually, the problem was even worse. because that Yahoo would link to sites, but the reality is that all those sites had lots of pages. And the pages were increasing even more. And think about a newspaper on the internet. Every single day, it's generating 100 new pages easily. And so Google came along, and what made Google unique is the idea of leveraging links, the interconnections between those pages to figure out what mattered and how to find it. And what was so powerful about that, what made it different, is that not only could it handle the scale of the internet, but actually, as the internet got larger, Google got better. It linked its quality to the scale of the internet. And what happened is the entire internet basically was within Google. That whole haystack was in there, and you could go there to the front page, and you could go anywhere on the internet, and it's still that case today. And what did this mean sort of economically? You go back to how you used to get information, and you used to be you'd go get a newspaper delivered to your house, buy it at the newsstand, and it was a bundle. And why did newspapers have economic power? They had economic power because they controlled the distribution of news, the only way to get it out there. They controlled the printing presses, they controlled the trucks, they had the paper boys like me when I was a kid, and it was all bundled together. They could put together editorial and advertising in a bundle because they solved the hardest problem. That hardest problem was delivery, was distribution, and that gave them economic power. You go on the internet though, and that bundle is just blown up to all those individual pages. And now it's how do you find the right page? And Google is sitting at the front door saying, I can find that needle for you. And as there's more and more pages, my accuracy actually improves. And everyone flowed to Google. Why? Because the hardest problem on the internet for information is not distribution, it's free. The marginal cost of going to a new web page is effectively zero. The hardest problem was now discovery, which Google solved. And so everyone came to there, and boop, Google could drop ads right in front of where everyone was already going, and the rest is history, as they say. And so this idea of previously there used to be the hardest problem was solving that distribution problem that gave economic power, where you could build bundles because you could get it to consumers. That was before the internet. After the internet, when it was in the information area where everything was everywhere, you could get to anything for free. You can go type any URL, you can go anywhere. All those pages, in theory, you can go to any one of them on your own. In reality, though, how can you find them? How do you know where to go? And you solve that problem, and you get power. And the users, and you get a virtuous cycle going on, where the users go there because it's better, which gives the sites an incentive to acclimate themselves to that person in the middle. And think about, what is the SEO industry? The SEO industry is this massive industry that is all about how can you better commoditize yourself for Google's good. It's incredible. People literally spend all kinds of money to make themselves more commoditized for Google's sake. And on the user side, they use it more, gives Google more data, more feedback, makes search better, and you get a virtuous cycle. When more suppliers come on, more users come on, and you get more and more power. And you have a very similar idea with Facebook. What did Facebook used to have? Your bundle used to be the places in your life and your friends and your family, whether it be at school, whether it be in your neighborhood, your club, your family, your church, wherever it might be. And this wasn't necessarily an economic sort of relationship, but that was the hardest problem. So where do you find friends? How do you connect with friends? Where do you go? I'm young enough that I remembering to take a quarter when you go out, because if you go out with your friends, you can't find them. You have to actually use a payphone. Unfortunately, if they're out too, then you could literally walk around all night long and actually never run into your friends. You come forward now, and what's the hardest problem? You have not just friends everywhere, but now you have all sorts of content everywhere. You're bored, you're sitting backstage, you're sitting on your phone right now because I'm droning on, and what you can do, you flip on Facebook, go through it, and it's just feeding everything to you. It's feeding information, it's feeding quizzes, it's feeding the modern horoscope, as I like to call them, it's feeding your friends, your family, your niece's update, and the commoditization of Facebook is even more total than Google. You think about it, on Facebook, a story from the New York Times is given the exact same prominence as the picture of your niece that was just born. It's just all completely atomized content. And again, like Google, you drop ads in there, and boom, you have one heck of a business. And so you see things like Larry Page saying, our competition is only a click away, and he's right. You could go somewhere else. But what is so powerful about these companies is no one wants to go anywhere else. You could go to Bing and no one wants to. Why? Because Google is better. Why is it better? Because more people, even if they have the exact same technology, Google has the lead in users and in sites that are tuned for Google, and that feedback cycle means it keeps getting better. And this feedback loop is very powerful. So this is my final slide in Chicago. So digital platforms are aggregators. They control demand, they deliver a superior user experience, they pull suppliers onto the platform's their own terms, they benefit from scale, they tend towards winner take all. You can see this sort of feedback loop benefiting. But again, the conversation started, and they started talking about Amazon and Microsoft. Again, University of Chicago, packed with people who were arguing on both sides of the Microsoft case. In the Microsoft case, the Microsoft platform was such a frame of reference at this conference that really brought this home to me. That, wait, we are using Microsoft and Windows as the context to talk about Google and Facebook, and I'm not quite sure that makes sense. And it dawned on me that this platform word that we use and throw around all the time, there actually is a meaningful difference between a platform and an aggregator. I've been calling aggregators platforms all along, but there actually is some very important differences. If you think about what does a platform look like, it looks like a platform, like the name came out for a reason. You have third parties that sit on top, that deliver value on top of the platform. Think of applications on Windows, for example, whether it be ones that you bought in the store or line of business applications, all sorts of things. And the users are giving money and forming a customer relationship with those third parties, as well as with the platform. And actually, if you think about something like AWS or Azure or something like that, it's actually gone even further, where the customers aren't even seeing the platform. They're just paying the third-party suppliers directly, who are then passing the money down to the underlying platform. And this is very different than an aggregator. Notice, just look at the structure of it, where you have the platform, you have the third party, and you have the users, and there's that relationship there, whereas this other side, the aggregator is firmly in the middle. And you have this idea where a platform facilitates a connection between third parties and developers. That's where the power of the Windows platform comes from. It came from connecting those applications, connecting it with users, and having the API that tied all of it together, whereas an aggregator completely intermediates. The whole point is it doesn't matter what's on the other side. You're just giving you a piece of content, giving you the content that you want, whatever it might be. And this relationship is very, very different, and it's important to understand the difference for everyone sort of in this context, for everyone that is, whether it's the person in the middle, the platform or aggregator, whether it's competitors, or whether it's regulators thinking about these markets. And I remember this quote from Sean Palpatia about Bill Gates, and you can read it if you want, but he was talking about Facebook platform. He's very proud we'd build this platform, and Microsoft came in and invested for that 15 billion mark, and you just talk about Bill Gates, we got a great platform, and Bill Gates is like, you don't have shit. And excuse my language. And he's like, it's in the quote, it's not my fault. But he said that last line is the key. A platform is when the economic value of everybody that uses it exceeds the value of the company that creates it. Then it's a platform. And I think this is being sort of the Bill Gates line. Like, are you a platform or are you not a platform? And you think about the various companies, where is the economic value in the value chain accruing to? You have one side for sure. Let's start with the other side. Let's start with Microsoft and Windows. Microsoft used to brag. They would put it in their financial reports what share of the overall ecosystem value they harvested. They wanted to be in like the high 20s or so, like 27%, 29%. That was, to them, their sweet spot. That meant that they were not only gaining lots of value for themselves, but they were building a sort of fortress around them because everyone around them was making money, because they were facilitating that sort of connection. And you see this on sorts like AWS or Azure, where the vast majority of the value on top of them is going to the companies that are built on top, and then AWS is kind of taking a skim of all of it, right? And you see Amazon is actually moving more and more this direction with their store, where merchant services, the idea is Amazon is just going to facilitate a connection between the merchants and the customers, take a skim of it, and profit very nicely. On the other side, you have Facebook and Google. Facebook and Google are taking all of the value of their ecosystems. And you think about, why does Facebook treat publishers so badly? Because they have zero incentive not to. All their incentives are to take it all themselves. There's no reason for Facebook, beyond goodwill, to do anything for publishers because it's all just commoditized content. If one story's not there, another one will be. It doesn't really matter. Apple here is interesting. I think one reason the App Store is not as strong, in my opinion, as it could be, it makes a lot of money, mostly on games, but it's not as much as a differentiator as I think it could be, is because they take too much of the value. They harvest too much of the value in the ecosystem and don't give enough to developers so they can build big and strong companies. But the reason why this matters, this is the last slide, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it. The reason why this matters is if you start out, if you don't understand the distinction between platforms and aggregators, and you take that Microsoft mindset, and again, I was at this conference with a lot of regulators, so that was sort of what I was thinking of, this perspective, you're going to do the exact wrong thing because they're the exact opposite. If you're a platform, you have open access on proprietary tech, right? That's the whole point of Windows. Anyone can build a Windows application. The more developers, the more building applications, the better. Anyone come on. We're gonna keep a solid hold on the core sort of technology so that we can own that facilitation. But the more people that come on, the better. Aggregators the other side. You're not going to come in. You come in on their terms, and that's it. You put your content. Facebook will take a page. Google will take a page. And what made it great for Google and Facebook is that they entered an environment that was already so fragmented, right? You already had all the sites out there, you had all the pages out there. You had the economic models already falling apart. For third parties then, you have to think, what's my strategy? If you're working with a platform, you want to partner with the platform. Yeah, it's going to be painful. They're going to do things. They might compete with you. But by and large, you will find success by building a solid business on top of that platform. There were many large and very profitable companies built on top of Windows. And that's the mindset, is how can I work better with this platform? How can I accommodate myself to it? How can I build on top of it? Why? Because that's how I get to the customers. That's how I get that relationship with the customers. Aggregators are the opposite. You need to get away from them. You see all the success stories, whatever there are in, say, publishing, they're all about going away from Google and Facebook, building a direct connection with customers, whether it be through subscriptions or niche advertising, whatever it might be. And in all these markets, if you're on them, you're on their terms. And the terms are particularly, when it comes to Google and Facebook, are not very good. And you think about a regulation perspective, there's more and more talk about Google and Facebook. Are they a monopoly? Are they not? Et cetera, et cetera. And the problem is well, that's one, it's an interesting question you could talk about. Is it a monopoly when you really can go somewhere else? But two, if you were to do something from a regulatory perspective, how should you think about it? And for a platform, you want to limit vertical foreclosure. You don't want the platform to favor, say, their own thing on top of the platform and make it hard for someone else to compete. For Amazon, for example, from my perspective, what I have concern about is Amazon harvesting data from products sold on their site, then building the exact same product or whatever it might be, and knowing that's going to be successful, and then they can promote it. Like it's problematic. It's certainly worth paying attention to. That's what you want to pay attention to. On the aggregators, though, it's all about the horizontal reach, because that power comes from having all the users, getting that virtuous cycle, getting all the suppliers, and building that up. And this is why, in my estimation, the greatest regulatory failure of the last 10 years was Facebook being allowed to buy Instagram. Now, I can understand why it happened, because we don't have the regulatory toolkit to think about network effects and what matters when you combine one network effect-driven company with another. But what played out was they were able to expand their access in a horizontal way to more users and more time within those users themselves. Why? Because you think about Instagram from a platform perspective, it's like it's hard to see what the problem is. You think about it when the power is not about going vertical and foreclosing, but the power is getting more and more touch points and more access to consumers, and it's quite obviously an issue. So the good thing is I was able to come here. I was able to change my talk, and I hope, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about, because you have all the controversy and all the issues with Google and Facebook coming up, and it's so tempting to, one, do something, do anything, and two, the do something, do anything, especially in the short term, is always going to reach backwards. It's going to say, what did we do before? What made sense previously? And if we do that, if you think about the world in terms of platforms and apply that thinking to Google, apply it to Facebook, you're going to actually end up doing the exact wrong thing. That's why the difference really matters. Thank you very much.